It's her lifeline, the American money that funds their Indian life. A monthly deposit from the United States Treasury, a direct link back to a country she no longer calls home. For Jenny Slatten, that Social Security check is more than just income. It's the very foundation of her existence with Sumit Singh. It pays for their rent, their food, their life together in Uttar Pradesh. But a federal benefits expert warns that this financial arrangement isn't just a clever loophole. It could be a federal crime. The idyllic life they've built, broadcast to millions on 90 Day Fiancé, might be resting on a pillar of deliberate deception, a fraud against the very system that supports them. And if that pillar collapses, their entire world could come crashing down, leaving them with nothing but the consequences of a high-stakes gamble against the United States government. Their dream life could be funded by a potential federal crime. And if you think this theory is as explosive as I do, and you want to see more deep dives that the mainstream channels are too afraid to touch, then do me a favor. Take a second to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell. It tells YouTube you want the real stories, the exclusive theories that expose what's really happening behind the scenes of your favorite shows. Your support is what allows us to dig this deep. Now, let's get into the evidence. To understand the magnitude of the situation Jenny and Sumit may have created for themselves, we first need to clear up a common misconception. Is it legal to receive U.S. Social Security benefits while living in another country? The answer, in most cases, is yes. The Social Security Administration, or SSA, has procedures in place for millions of American retirees and beneficiaries who choose to live abroad. You can live in Paris or Tokyo or Mexico City, and your benefits can be deposited into a U.S. bank account or even, in some cases, a foreign one. The SSA website is very clear on this. They list the countries you can live in and receive payments, and India is on that approved list. So, on the surface, everything seems fine. Jenny is a U.S. citizen. She paid into the system her whole working life, and now she's collecting her due while living in an approved country. Case closed, right? That's what they want you to think. That's the simple, surface-level understanding. But the federal government, especially when it comes to entitlement programs worth trillions of dollars, operates on nuance, on technicalities, and on definitions that can be the difference between a legal retirement and a federal felony. The entire case, the entire theory of a potential fraud, hinges on one deceptively simple concept: the idea of a primary residence. According to sources, former SSA fraud investigators who have spent their careers untangling complex benefit schemes, this is the critical vulnerability in Jenny and Sumit's arrangement. The ability to receive benefits abroad is predicated on the assumption that you are a U.S. citizen residing abroad, not that you have completely and permanently severed your ties to the United States to become a permanent resident of another nation without updating your status. The system is designed for expatriates, not for individuals who have, for all intents and purposes, emigrated. The distinction is subtle, but it is everything. So what defines a primary residence in the eyes of a federal agency? It's not just about where you sleep at night. It's a collection of ties, a pattern of life that demonstrates your connection to a country. Think of it as a checklist. Do you maintain a U.S. mailing address that is actually your place of residence? Do you own or rent property in the United States? Do you have a U.S. driver's license? Are you registered to vote? Where do you file your taxes from, and what residency status do you claim on those forms? Where are your primary banking relationships? Do you have family, community, and economic ties that point to the U.S. as your home base, even if you're on a long-term trip? For most expats, the answers create a clear picture. They might rent an apartment in Rome, but they still have their house in Florida being looked after by their kids. They use a relative's address for mail, but fly back every 6 months. They maintain their American bank accounts and file taxes as a U.S. citizen living abroad. There is a clear and demonstrable intent to return. Their life, documented through official records, shows that America is still their home. Now, let's apply this same checklist to Jenny Slatten. This is where the idyllic picture of her Indian retirement begins to unravel and look like something far more precarious. We watched on international television as Jenny made the most significant move possible to sever ties with her home country. She sold her house. This wasn't a case of renting it out or leaving it with family. It was a liquidation of her single most important asset and her primary physical tie to the United States. She sold her property, packed her bags, and left. This act alone, from an investigator's perspective, is a massive red flag. It's a declaration that she doesn't need a physical anchor in the U.S. because she has no plans to return to it. Next, the U.S. address. Where does the Social Security Administration send her official correspondence? Where does the US Treasury send her tax documents? It's highly probable she's using the address of a child or another relative. While this is common, in Jenny's specific context, it becomes part of a larger, more troubling pattern. If you are using a US address for official government business, you are implicitly representing that you have a residential connection to that address. But Jenny doesn't live there. She has no property there. She is, by her own admission on the show, living full-time, 365 days a year, in India. An investigator would argue that this isn't just a matter of convenience. It's a potential misrepresentation of her living situation. She is maintaining the appearance of a U.S. residency for official purposes while physically living a life completely disconnected from it. Then we have her own words. For years on 90 Day Fiancé, Jenny has been unequivocal. Her life is in India. Her home is with Sumit. She has repeatedly expressed her desire to live in India permanently and has shown no significant intention of returning to the United States to live. Her actions back this up. She went through a grueling, years-long process to be able to stay in India, dealing with visa extensions, parental opposition, and ultimately marriage to Sumit, which solidified her ability to remain in the country long-term. Every decision, every statement, every tearful confession on camera has pointed in one direction. India is her permanent home now. She has effectively emigrated. When you assemble these pieces, the picture becomes alarmingly clear for them. No U.S. property, no actual U.S. residence, only an address of convenience, a stated and demonstrated intent to live permanently in a foreign country, a life completely funded by a U.S. federal benefits program. A fraud investigator would look at this and see a textbook case of someone who may have failed to update their residency status. They would argue that Jenny is no longer a U.S. resident temporarily living abroad. She is a permanent resident of India who is still classifying herself, for the purposes of federal benefits, as if she were based in the United States. The theory is that her entire financial structure is built on a misrepresentation of her residency status to the U.S. government. She is, allegedly, gaming the system by leveraging a rule designed for American expatriates to fund a permanent life as an immigrant in another country. This is where Sumit Singh enters the equation, not just as a husband, but as a potential co-conspirator. The legal definition of conspiracy doesn't require a smoky backroom deal. It simply requires two or more people to agree to commit an unlawful act, and for one of them to take a step in furtherance of that agreement. In this scenario, the alleged unlawful act is defrauding a federal program through material misrepresentation of residency. And Sumit's involvement is not passive, it is active and essential. He lives off of Jenny's Social Security benefits. It is their sole source of income. We have seen them on the show discussing their budget, agonizing over expenses, all centered around that single monthly payment from the U.S. Treasury. He knows the money comes from the U.S. government. He knows it's her retirement benefit. And he knows it's what allows them to live together in India. By co-mingling his finances with Jenny's, by living entirely off these funds, and by participating in the lifestyle that this arrangement facilitates, Sumit could be seen by federal prosecutors as an active participant in the alleged scheme. He is directly benefiting from the potential misrepresentation. He has a vested interest in ensuring the money keeps flowing. An investigator could argue that every time Sumit goes to the market and spends money from their joint account, he is furthering the conspiracy. He is enjoying the fruits of a tree that is allegedly rooted in fraudulent soil. This elevates the situation from a simple case of an individual beneficiary making a mistake on their paperwork to a potential criminal partnership. It's no longer just Jenny's problem, it's their problem. The charge wouldn't be defrauding the government against Jenny alone. It could be conspiracy to defraud the government against both Jenny and Sumit. Let's explore how fragile this entire setup truly is. The Social Security Administration doesn't just send out checks into the void forever without asking questions. They have robust and increasingly sophisticated systems to verify eligibility. They conduct what are called redeterminations, or continuing eligibility reviews. While some types are more common for disability benefits, the principle applies across the board. The SSA has the right and the responsibility to periodically review your case to ensure you still qualify for the benefits you are receiving. These reviews can be random, or they can be triggered by specific events or information. Imagine a scenario. An SSA employee, or perhaps an investigator at the Office of the Inspector General, is a fan of 90 Day Fiancé, or, more likely, a disgruntled viewer decides to submit a tip through the SSA's official fraud reporting portal. It's easy to do. The website is public. All they have to do is state the facts as presented on the show. Jenny Slatten, a Social Security recipient, has stated on television that she has sold all her U.S. property and lives permanently in India with her husband, Sumit Singh, who is also supported by these funds. That single tip is all it would take to unleash the full weight of a federal inquiry. What happens then? It starts with a letter, likely sent to that U.S. address of convenience that Jenny is using. The letter would be formal and bureaucratic, but its message would be terrifying. It would be a request for information, asking her to provide proof of her current residency. They would want to see utility bills, a lease or mortgage statement, a valid U.S. driver's license, and other documents that prove she resides in the United States. Of course, she cannot provide any of these things. She could perhaps offer a relative's utility bill with their name on it, but that would only dig the hole deeper, potentially implicating her family member in the process. When she fails to provide adequate proof, the investigation escalates. The SSA has agreements and data-sharing capabilities with other federal agencies. They can check her travel records through the Department of Homeland Security to see when she last entered or exited the United States. A quick query would show she left years ago and has not returned. They can check her IRS filings. What address is she using on her tax returns? Is she filing as a resident? They can even issue administrative subpoenas to her U.S. bank to review her account activity. They would see a pattern of a monthly deposit from the Treasury followed by a series of international ATM withdrawals or wire transfers to an Indian bank account. The digital breadcrumbs would paint a crystal-clear picture that corroborates the tip: a U.S. beneficiary living a permanent life in India. At this point, the SSA would likely make a formal determination. Based on the evidence, they would conclude that she is not a resident of the United States and has not been for a significant period. The consequences of this determination are swift and brutal. First, her benefits would be immediately suspended. The lifeline would be cut. The monthly deposit would stop. Their income would drop to zero overnight. But it gets much, much worse. The government doesn't just stop payments. They demand to be paid back. The SSA would calculate the total amount of benefits she received from the point they determined she was no longer a primary resident of the U.S. This could amount to years of payments, potentially tens of thousands or even over $100,000. This is called an overpayment. And they don't just ask for the money back. They add penalties and interest. The debt would be legally enforceable. And the U.S. government has an incredibly long reach and a very long memory when it comes to collecting what it's owed. They could garnish any future income she might earn, seize assets if she had any left in the U.S., and intercept federal tax refunds. Her financial life, as connected to the United States, would be effectively over. And because Sumit was a knowing beneficiary of these funds, he could also be held civilly liable. Their idyllic life wouldn't just collapse. It would be replaced by a crushing, insurmountable debt to the most powerful creditor in the world. Beyond the financial ruin, there is the specter of criminal charges. Defrauding a federal program is a felony. Providing false or misleading information to a federal agency is a felony. Conspiracy to do so is a felony. While the Department of Justice doesn't prosecute every single case of benefit fraud, especially with smaller dollar amounts involving the elderly, Jenny's case has a unique and dangerous aggravating factor. It's public. She and Sumit have flaunted their lifestyle on an internationally broadcast television show. They have, in essence, created a mountain of evidence against themselves season after season. A prosecutor could see this not just as a simple case of fraud, but a brazen and public disregard for federal law, which might make them want to make an example out of her. The sheer visibility of their situation turns what might have been a quiet administrative penalty into a potential criminal matter. Think about the sheer recklessness of their position. They have documented their own potential crime for a global audience. Every scene where they discuss their finances, every time Jenny says, "This is my home now," every shot of them living their life in India is another piece of evidence for a potential prosecution. They have handed an investigator everything they would need on a silver platter. It's a level of self-incrimination that is almost breathtaking. They are living on a financial knife's edge, and the blade is getting sharper with every episode that airs. Their entire life, their marriage, their future is predicated on the hope that nobody in a position of power at the Social Security Administration ever decides to pay attention to a popular reality TV show. It's a gamble of epic proportions. They are betting that bureaucratic inertia and the sheer volume of cases will allow them to slip through the cracks indefinitely. But in the digital age, that is a foolish bet to make. Information moves too fast. The world is too connected. All it takes is one person to connect the dots and send an email, and their carefully constructed world funded by a monthly check from a country Jenny no longer calls home, could be dismantled with a single bureaucratic decision. This isn't just about a simple misunderstanding of the rules. An argument could be made that this arrangement is a deliberate and calculated decision. They must have known, on some level, that their situation was unusual. The idea that you can permanently leave a country, sell all your assets, establish a new life, and still be entitled to the full financial support of the country you left behind seems too good to be true, because it very well might be. They chose to ignore the potential risks, to push forward with their plan, perhaps out of desperation, perhaps out of love, or perhaps out of a misguided belief that they would never get caught. They built their dream on a foundation that a federal investigator could easily label as sand, and the tide of government oversight is always, eventually, coming in. Let's break down the psychology at play here, because it speaks to the desperation that fuels the entire 90-Day Fiancé universe. Jenny was in her 60s, facing a future alone in America. She had fallen in love with a man half her age in a country halfway across the world. For her, this was her last shot at happiness, a final chance to have the love and partnership she craved. The Social Security check was her golden ticket. It was the one asset she had that was portable, the one thing that made a life with Sumit possible. Without that money, there was no life in India. There was no marriage, there was no story. It was the financial engine of their entire relationship. So, did she consciously decide to commit a federal crime? It's perhaps more likely that she engaged in a form of willful blindness. She may have chosen not to ask the hard questions, not to read the fine print on the SSA website too closely, not to consult with an expert on international benefits. She and Sumit likely told themselves that since the money was rightfully hers, earned over a lifetime of work, she should be able to do whatever she wants with it. It's a common and emotionally resonant argument, but it's one that has no standing in federal law. The law doesn't care about your intentions or your love story. It cares about definitions, statutes, and residency requirements. Her emotional truth, her desire for a happy ending, is in direct conflict with the bureaucratic truth of the U.S. Code of Federal Regulations, and Sumit's role is equally complex. For years, he was trapped between his love for Jenny and his duty to his disapproving parents. He was unable to provide for her in the way a traditional Indian husband would be expected to. Jenny's income wasn't just a convenience, it was a necessity that absolved him of his financial responsibilities, at least in the short term. It allowed him to have the wife he wanted without having to engage in the career or family conflict that would have been necessary to support her himself. He too had every reason to engage in that same willful blindness, to not question the source of the money or its legal stability. The arrangement, as precarious as it might be, was the path of least resistance for both of them. It solved all of their immediate problems, while creating a much larger, more dangerous problem that looms over their future. The reckoning, if it comes, will be a quiet and bureaucratic affair that will have all the force of a natural disaster in their lives. It won't be a dramatic courtroom showdown. It will be a series of official-looking envelopes, confusing legal jargon, and the sudden, irreversible termination of their only source of income. It will be the cold, impersonal machinery of a government agency methodically dismantling their life from 8,000 miles away. They will be left stranded with no income, a massive debt to the U.S. government, and potentially facing legal jeopardy. The idyllic life they showcase to the world will be exposed as a house of cards, and a single government review is the gust of wind that could bring it all down. Their love story, which overcame so many cultural and familial obstacles, may find its final, insurmountable obstacle in a subsection of the Social Security Act. It's a cautionary tale about the difference between what feels right and what is legally permissible, and the devastating consequences that can occur when the two are in conflict. Their entire shared dream is one bureaucratic decision away from becoming an absolute nightmare. The U.S. government has a very long reach, and its memory is even longer. Let's delve deeper into the mechanics of a potential federal investigation, because this is where the theoretical risk becomes a terrifyingly practical reality. The United States government, particularly the Internal Revenue Service and the Social Security Administration, has spent the last 2 decades building a global financial surveillance network that is nothing short of breathtaking in its scope. The key to this network is an act passed in 2010 called FATICA, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. On the surface, it was designed to catch wealthy tax evaders hiding money in offshore accounts. But its ripple effects have created a system that can inadvertently flag someone exactly like Jenny. Under FATCA, foreign financial institutions, including every major bank in India, are required to report information about accounts held by U.S. citizens to the IRS. If they don't comply, they face a crippling 30% withholding tax on their U.S. source income. So they all comply. This means that every year, Sumit and Jenny's Indian bank is likely sending a report to the U.S. Treasury detailing the existence of their account, the account balance, and the activity within it. Now, imagine a data analyst or an algorithm at the IRS or SSA cross-referencing this information. On one screen, they have Jenny Slatten's Social Security file, which lists a primary residence in the United States, let's say at her daughter's house in California. On the other screen, they have a FATCA report from a bank in Uttar Pradesh, India, showing an active joint account in the names of Jenny Slatten and Sumit Singh, with regular monthly deposits that match her benefit amount, and a consistent pattern of local withdrawals for daily living expenses. The system would immediately flag a discrepancy. How can a person who officially resides in California be conducting 100% of their financial life out of a bank account in northern India? This isn't a case of someone on a long vacation. The data would show a multi-year pattern of behavior inconsistent with a U.S. residency claim. This is the silent digital tripwire they could cross without even knowing it. They are living in an era of total financial transparency, whether they realize it or not, and their banking records could be the primary witness against them. Furthermore, the reach of the U.S. government isn't limited to digital data. The Department of State has what are called Federal Benefits Units, or FBUs, located in embassies and consulates around the world. These units are the SSA's eyes and ears on the ground. Their job is to assist beneficiaries abroad, but they are also tasked with preventing fraud and abuse. If a tip were to come in, it could easily be routed to the FBU at the U.S. Embassy in New Delhi. An agent there could be tasked with a preliminary inquiry. This could involve something as simple as attempting to contact Jenny through official channels in India, or even conducting a field visit. The very existence of these overseas units means that the SSA doesn't have to rely solely on records from 8,000 miles away. They have personnel in-country who can verify, investigate, and report back. The idea that Jenny and Sumit are safely out of reach simply because they are in India is a dangerous and outdated fantasy. In the modern, interconnected world, there are very few places to hide from the administrative reach of the U.S. government. Now let's expand on the legal peril for Sumit. He is not a U.S. citizen. He is not the one receiving the benefits directly, so he might feel insulated from the consequences. This would be a grave miscalculation. Under U.S. federal law, there are several concepts that would pull him directly into the heart of the matter. The first, as we discussed, is conspiracy, but even beyond that, there is the principle of aiding and abetting. If he knows about the potential illegality of the arrangement and continues to participate and benefit from it, he is legally just as culpable as the primary actor. His knowledge and participation are all that's required. But let's say a criminal prosecution is deemed unlikely. He would still face life-altering administrative consequences. If the U.S. government determines that he was a willing participant in a scheme to defraud a federal agency, he would almost certainly be declared inadmissible to the United States. This is a formal designation by the Department of Homeland Security and the State Department. It would mean he could never get a visa to visit the U.S., not for a holiday, not for a family emergency, not for any reason. The door to America would be permanently slammed shut in his face. If Jenny ever needed to return to the U.S. for medical care or to see her family, she would have to go alone. Their dream of being together, which they fought so hard for, would be shattered by an invisible, bureaucratic wall that separates countries. Think of the irony. Sumit fought his own family for years to be with Jenny, an American woman. He chose her over the traditions and expectations of his culture. Yet, because of the very financial arrangement that allows them to be together in India, he could be permanently barred from ever setting foot in his wife's home country. The very foundation of their life together could become the reason they could never have a complete life that spans both of their worlds. This brings us to the most damning aspect of this entire theory, the evidence they have so willingly and publicly provided. In a typical fraud case, an investigator has to work hard. They have to subpoena bank records, conduct interviews, search for documents, and painstakingly piece together a timeline of events to prove intent. For Jenny and Sumit, no such work is necessary. They have done it all for the investigators. They have sat in front of a camera crew and essentially narrated their potential crime for the past several years. Imagine a prosecutor's presentation in court. Exhibit A, a clip from 90 Day Fiancé, where Jenny tearfully explains that she sold her house and has nothing left in America. Exhibit B, a scene where she and Sumit are sitting at their kitchen table in India, poring over their budget, and Sumit says something like, "We must be careful with your social security money this month." Exhibit C, a clip of Jenny on a video call with her daughter, confirming she has no plans to return to the US and that India is her permanent home. Exhibit D, a scene of them discussing their visa situation, making it clear that their primary goal is to find a way for Jenny to remain in India for the rest of her life. It's a prosecutor's dream. They don't need to find a smoking gun. Jenny and Sumit have polished it, loaded it, and handed it over on national television. Their desire for fame, or perhaps just for the income from the show, has led them to create a perfect, unassailable record of their living situation and financial dependency. They have traded their privacy and their legal security for a television storyline. They may see it as sharing their love story with the world, but a federal agent would see it as a multi-season confession. Let's address the most common defense that their supporters might offer. They are in love. They didn't mean any harm. They probably just didn't understand the complex rules. This is the ignorance of the law is no excuse problem. When you sign up to receive federal benefits, you are legally attesting that you understand and will abide by the rules of the program. The onus is on the recipient, not the government, to ensure continued compliance. The SSA website has pages and pages of information about the rules for beneficiaries living abroad. There are phone numbers to call and offices to contact. Claiming ignorance is not a defense. It is an admission of negligence. Moreover, the argument that they are harmless lovers caught in a bureaucratic net falls apart when you consider the scale of the system they are a part of. The Social Security program pays out over $1 trillion a year. It is the largest item in the federal budget. Its integrity is protected by a vast and powerful enforcement apparatus, the Office of the Inspector General, precisely because the system is so massive and so vital to millions of Americans. To the SSA, Jenny is not a romantic figure from a TV show. She is a case number, a recipient who is either in compliance or out of compliance. The system is binary. There is no room for sentiment. Their love story is legally irrelevant. What they should have done, and what serves as a cautionary tale for anyone else considering retiring abroad on Social Security, is sought professional advice. They should have consulted with an immigration attorney or a financial advisor who specializes in expatriate benefits. They would have been told about the residency requirements and the potential pitfalls. They could have structured their lives in a way that was compliant. Perhaps that would have meant Jenny establishing a different kind of visa in India, or maintaining more substantial ties to the US, or even exploring if Sumit could find work to supplement their income. There were almost certainly legal pathways they could have taken, but they chose the easy path, the path of least resistance, which also happens to be the path of greatest legal risk. Their story is a microcosm of a larger 21st century phenomenon. As the world becomes more globalized, more and more Americans will want to retire in countries with a lower cost of living. People will want to take their Social Security benefits and live in Thailand or Portugal or, like Jenny, in India, and the US government knows this. They are actively watching for it and tightening the rules to ensure that benefits intended for US residents are not being used to permanently subsidize lives in other nations without proper oversight. Jenny and Sumit are not pioneers in a clever loophole. They may be test cases for a new era of enforcement. So, what is the endgame? The reckoning, when it comes, will likely be silent and swift. There will be no dramatic courtroom scene. It will begin with that letter, that request for information. And from that moment on, their lives will be consumed by a bureaucratic battle they cannot possibly win. They will be asked to prove a negative, to prove they haven't abandoned their US residency, which all of their actions and words have confirmed they have. They will be buried in paperwork, their idyllic life replaced by stress and fear. The final decision will come in another official envelope, informing them that their benefits have been terminated and that an overpayment debt has been established against them. At that moment, their dream life vanishes. Their income is gone. They are left with a massive debt they can never repay. Jenny would be in her late 60s or 70s, stranded in a foreign country with no source of income and no home to return to in America. Sumit would be married to a financially ruined woman, facing his own permanent ban from her home country. The shame and stress would be immense, far greater than any disapproval his parents could ever have mustered. The fragility of their existence is terrifying because it is so complete. They have no backup plan. They have no other source of income. They have placed all their eggs in one basket, and that basket is hanging by the very thin thread of government inaction. A single email from a disgruntled viewer could snip that thread. This is the ultimate cautionary tale that the 90 Day Fiancé franchise has ever produced. and it's happening in plain sight. It's a story about love, yes, but it's also a story about desperation, willful blindness, and the incredible risks people will take to achieve their dreams. It's a high-stakes drama where the antagonist isn't a disapproving mother or a cultural divide. It's the quiet, methodical, and inescapable reach of the United States government. Their dream life, funded by a monthly deposit, is built on a foundation that could be deemed a federal crime. The question is not if the foundation will crack, but when. And when it does, their entire world will collapse. So, what do you think? Are Jenny and Sumit masterminds of a clever international benefit scheme, or are they a naive couple who have unwittingly stumbled into a federal felony? Is this a story of calculated fraud or a tragedy of errors? Let us know your theory in the comments below using the hashtag Social Security Scandal. And if you found this deep dive compelling, share this video with someone you know. It's more than just reality TV gossip. It's a stunning cautionary tale about the consequences of trying to outsmart a system that has a long reach and an even longer memory. The truth is often hidden in the fine print, and for Jenny and Sumit, that truth could be the ticking time bomb that eventually destroys the very life they fought so hard to build together.